Hello and welcome to my podcast on radical self-love, an Ayurvedic perspective on healing body and mind. My name is Sandra Hayes and I'm a Vedic practitioner, meaning I utilize Ayurveda, yoga and Vedic astrology as well as transformational creativity to help you become a conscious creator of your own life, health and well-being. For more information and for access to my online learning platform, The Little School of Happiness, please go to www.sandrahayes.eu. So, great. I have David Collins with me today, which is really, really great because David, you're my long-term teacher, really. You're kind of, actually my most important teacher in my yoga development, I think, because I've done my second yoga teacher training with you, the Ashtanga yoga teacher training with you. And also I remember driving up to Dublin before the teacher training even to take your Mysore classes, driving up at the time, it took me 2 hours nearly to drive up just for a Mysore class, but it was so well worth it. It was really, really good. I was really impressed at the time, because it was also my first experiences of Mysore classes. And it was just, such a really, really good experience having you as a teacher. And also now that I do the yoga teacher training in Germany, I have to say I'm actually modeling quite a lot after your teacher training as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, seriously, you had a really important impact, I think, on my yoga journey. And also one of the things that I really loved about your teacher training is that you were the only training I did where we actually really read through the Yoga Sutras and discussed them and had a little bit of a deeper understanding, came out with a much deeper understanding of what we're actually doing and, the kind of real reason of why we do yoga. So that was also really important for me. So thanks for that, first of all.
You're very welcome. I wish I had more students like you. If everybody was as clear and enthusiastic as you, then we'd have lots more teachers who are as good as you are also then to continue spreading the word about what it is we're trying to do to make the world a better place, really.
Yeah, well, that's what it is about, isn't it? It's kind of, making the world a better place and making ourselves, starting with ourselves, of course. And so that's one reason I want to talk to you about the Yoga Sutras. And, are you still teaching in that way? Are you still kind of, applying? I mean, maybe you're not teaching in exactly the same way, but I'm sure the Yoga Sutras are still, important and relevant to any kind of teaching, really. Why do you think they are still now in our days? Why are they still important for people to understand?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, almost everything we teach in the studio in Dublin is born out of the Yoga Sutra or some of the other seminal texts of yoga. And for people to understand how a text that's however many thousands of years old still has relevance to them today is sometimes not so easy. And very often there's a very intellectual approach to reading the sutra, and the practical experience of yoga hasn't really gotten rooted sufficiently for people to understand maybe the nuance of what's being said. So one of the things we do in the studio is in our teaching is very much about trying to make the sutra really practical because in essence, you've got to remember that when we talk about this book, the Yoga Sutra, our text that we have has come down as a book now, the Yoga Sutra of Patanjali, it was a summation of the wisdom of all of the thousands of years of development from really ancient times to Patanjali's time of roughly 2,000 years ago, perhaps. The wisdom of yoga and what it was for. And yoga, essentially, we could say, is about balance. And in the same way that in our bodies, our nature, the nature of our whole physiology is to try to maintain balance, to keep optimal functioning. The experience we all make is that life throws us at times. We're always under pressure from our environment or from personal stress or from one thing or another, especially these days. And the whole system of yoga and its sister science of Ayurveda were developed to help us to redress those imbalances or to maintain our own balance in the face of the challenges of living. And the Yoga Sutra is really a practical handbook of how to do that. And it gives us a sort of step-by-step guide of saying, okay, look, this is what balance looks like and what the experience of it is. And that means balance at a physiological level, balance at an emotional level, balance at an intellectual or mental functioning level. And then it says, these are the problems in a way that in the second pada or book, we could say, in the second part of it, it says, these are the common problems that you come across. And these are the techniques that you can use to deal or to help redress them. So that's the approach we take to try to demystify it, because people think, they talk, as soon as you say the word yoga philosophy, or the two words yoga philosophy, you can see people's eyes glaze over.
Yeah.
And you've lost them, probably 90% of them. So, people like you are the rarer breed that go, oh, this is kind of interesting. What's this about? And the fact is, the problems that afflict humanity today, although they've changed radically in the last 100 years, and particularly in the last 40 years, with the advent of massive changes in technological communication, particularly stressors, the problems that are evoked within us at an emotional level, at a physiological level, are the exact same. People, essentially, human beings haven't changed that much.
Yeah.
And so that which was applicable thousands of years ago is just as applicable today if you're talking about, why am I feeling unhappy? Mm-hmm. Why am I not staying healthy? What imbalance has happened in my system that needs to be redressed?
Yeah.
And that's what the Yoga Sutra was there for.
Yeah.
Two other texts that we would often rely on, but we can focus more on the sutra, if you like, is we would, as you are very fond of as well, the Bhagavad Gita and the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, because they also give very clear, the Gita is like, it's like a play for modern, nowadays we often see things played out on stages which represent the life and the difficulties that people go through, or particular situations that exemplify something. And the Gita exemplifies what it is for a human being to have that inner struggle with themselves to find out what makes me tick and why is it difficult for me to find that sense of self and happiness and peacefulness within me. And the Hatha Pradipika has lots of techniques again for helping to maintain that balance or regain balance, because from the time we're born, we're put under stress. Mm-hmm. And stress is at the root very much of most of the chronic diseases that afflict humanity these days. Stress allied with maybe lifestyle and diet that isn't optimal. And if we have a clear guide that says, okay, understand who you are, understand yourself, understand a little bit about how you function at a physiological level, at an emotional level, and at a mental level. Utilize these practices to make things go a little bit more smoothly and see the results. And that's really very important. If we even take, most people think of yoga as postures.
Yeah.
I do yoga. That means when people say I do yoga, it means I go to a yoga class. Mm-hmm. And I roll out a mat and I do some physical exercise. Originally, and mostly in Patanjali and the Yoga Sutra, that wasn't the case. That wasn't the issue they were talking about. But we can get into that again. But he very simply does three things when he talks about yoga posture, which could be applicable to all postures, although he was probably talking mostly about meditation posture.
Mm.
He just says, be steady and comfortable in your postures.
Yeah.
So no strain, no difficulty breathing, no effort. And then he says, if you're steady and comfortable in your posture, then it's a yoga posture. If your physical position is steady and comfortable, you can call it a yoga posture. And the way you get into it should be effortless, and the way you get out of it should be effortless. And when you're in it, you should feel like you could stay there forever.
Yeah.
So, and he says, and if you achieve that, then you experience a state of peacefulness in which a level of happiness can be achieved that you haven't realized necessarily was even what you were looking for. Now, that's a very, very different kind of take on those three Yoga Sutra to the usual kind of literal word for word translation that makes it. So if you're in a class and somebody is straining to try and achieve something in a posture, which, I want to get to be able to do this, then they're putting their body under a stress instead of finding a place of balance between the amount of effort and the level of relaxation. And that's what our system is constantly trying to do. We obviously have to make effort in life. We have to move and we have to do things and we have to be active in life. But that has to be balanced properly so that we come back to the center. And I go back right from the beginning with people. Even yesterday, I was talking before a class and saying, it was fairly new students. So let's understand what the purpose of us being here is at some level. And to do that, we have to understand a little bit about who we are. Because if I ask I probably did it to you back in the day, said, who are you? Then most of us will answer with our name. And, I'm David, I'm from Dublin in Ireland, and I teach yoga, and I do this, and I do that. And we apply a whole pile of labels to ourselves. And I said to the guys yesterday, so imagine if you could kind of put this thought in your head. When you were a baby, before you had language, before you had an understanding of the sound that people were making was referring to you, and that was going to be your name, as you would discover, all you were doing was experiencing the world. You had no way of intellectually describing it. You were just experiencing. You were taking in sights. Didn't know what you were seeing. You were taking in sounds. You were taking in tastes, smells, and very quickly you were dividing the world into, I like this and I don't like that, purely on an instinctive, reactionary way. You were given whatever ice cream and you tasted good, and you were given crushed up broccoli and you tasted it and you decided, well, not so good. And the Yoga Sutra starts out and says, yoga is about bringing as much as possible to stillness the things that disturb, and it uses a big word in Sanskrit, chitta, and that's usually translated as consciousness. Disturbs consciousness. So if I say to a student, yoga is about, thank you for coming to class, we're going to teach you how to still the things that disturb consciousness, they're going to go, huh? What is that?
Yeah.
So what is consciousness? Let's not even go there for the moment, but you experience, as this baby, you're experiencing the world through your body, through the senses, having all these different things. And you can say, in that respect, I am a feeling, a perceiving being. I perceive the world with my eyes, my ears, my hands, my tongue, my nose, and I put together a picture of my world with those senses. Okay? But I divide the world then into things I like and things I don't like. Yeah. So at that level, I'm also a feeling being. I also fall into a trap, as we can talk about a bit later, that I try to repeat the things I've enjoyed. And if I don't get to repeat them, I'm unhappy. And I try to avoid the things that I didn't like so much. And if I have to have them, like the broccoli, I'm not so happy either. And this is a really important conundrum that we face, because we get confused about the fact that actually, if I eat the ice cream all the time, I'm going to suffer ultimately.
Yeah.
And if I eat the broccoli all the time, I'm going to be healthier and not to suffer so much. But initially, I think one is making me happy and one is making me sad. And so I avoid the broccoli and take the ice cream. But long term, that's going to shift.
That's that difference, the distinction between that pleasurable moment and the long-lasting happiness.
Absolutely. So you have these two levels then. I've experienced the world through my senses and I've emotionally reacted to it. So I have the other aspect of my persona, you could say, is I am a feeling being. So I'm a perceiving being, I'm a feeling being. And later, as we develop language and start to utilize that capacity that humans have at a very high level of, let's call it intellect. I've had a perception, I've had an emotional response to it, and now I can reflect on it. I can think about it. This also causes us a problem because we often think about the thing that we really want. To repeat the pleasurable and to avoid the painful is very often high on our list of priorities, and we experiences that cause us difficulty, we replay them over and over again, or we imagine what we want to have happen in the future. But in whatever we're doing, we have this third part of our being, which is I, the thinker. So we have I, the perceiver, I, the feeler, I, the thinker. And in this way, we experience the world, we react to it, and then we try to make sense of it. And that is how I would say to somebody, that's what consciousness is. That's your expression, that's consciousness expressing itself through the instrument of your body as the perceiver, through the instrument of your mind as the feeler, and through the instrument of your intellect as the thinker. So what yoga tells us is, if I bring the body to a place of really still, peaceful, nervous system balanced and quiet, everything settled, I, the perceiver, becomes quiet. If I'm balanced, my breath is balanced and steady, I calm the nervous system fully, I'm no longer agitated emotionally, I bring that I, the feeler aspect into quietness. And as we do that, we find that thinking begins to fall away. And when the perceptions, the emotions, and the thoughts become as still as possible, a different experience of being arises or is revealed, because it's always there. And that experience is one of a very peaceful, very happy, very compassionate, very loving being. And that's what our consciousness, this is what chitta is really, this underlying nature that's completely pure, completely untainted by the kind of imbalances that arise through all the perceptions, emotions, and thoughts that unbalances. And that's what the sutra says. It says, still the activities that disturb chitta are the fluctuations of, because every perception comes and goes. Every emotion comes and goes. Every thought comes and goes. So there's nothing continuous about it. It's constantly changing. It's in flux. This flux is the thing that's disturbing the peacefulness of consciousness. And when we quieten it all, we suddenly experience ourselves as an innately peaceful, loving, pure being.
Yeah.
And even that is kind of a lot to take in. And then you say, okay, well, look, how do I go about that? You have practices for the body to help bring the body into balance, the yoga postures. You have practices for the emotions to help bring the emotional seesaw into balance, breathing techniques. And you have practices for the mind, for the intellectual mind, to bring the thoughts to stillness, meditation.
Yeah.
And these are the third, fourth, fifth, and sixth limbs of the 8-limb system of yoga. And the first 2 limbs are diet and lifestyle, essentially.
Mm.
And the result of those are the 6th, the 7th, and 8th limbs of the 8 limbs, the peaceful state of experiencing that quietness of being, and then the bliss that follows that. Because ultimately, if we establish that as a condition that we experience and can retain some essence of, then we remain as an integrated samadhi. That word that they use which people translate as bliss, really it means integration.
Mm.
We've brought all of our functioning as a body, as a mind, as an emotional being, and as an intellect, the senses, the emotions, the intellect, all working optimally together. So there's a complete integration of being that makes it possible to cope with the difficulties that we encounter in life from a place of stability and equanimity. It's not that we're not affected by it, not that we don't get sad sometimes and don't experience ups and downs, but we have a resilience and a stability because we have an understanding of what our real nature is, rather than the kind of tumultuous nature of the world of the senses, emotions, and thoughts that's ever changing. And that gives us a great capacity then to live in a more positive way and to have a better and more positive influence. You often hear people often say to me, I've been doing this for a couple of years, and, people are telling me, oh, something different about you. What is it? And you say, oh, maybe it's doing a bit of yoga, and I feel good, and I feel healthy, and I'm eating a bit differently, and everything seems to work out a little bit more easily. And they go, but you know what? I think I'd like a piece of that. I'd like to try that. And so if we really want to create a world that's better and more peaceful, it starts with making ourselves better and more peaceful. Not better. It's very hard even to find the correct words for this. Yeah. To optimize our functioning and integrate it so that the natural state of our truest nature is expressed.
Yeah.
And that brings a huge benefit to the world. And the more of us who do that, the knock-on effect is huge.
Yeah.
But if we're acting out of that emotional agitation, or the kind of busy mind, I want to try this or this or this, I wish it was like it used to be in the past, or I wanted to be this way in the future, then our actions are colored by those emotions and thoughts, and they create more turmoil rather than more peacefulness.
Yeah, they bring us away from the present moment.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you were saying, you were talking about the 8 limbs and those, important points of diet and lifestyle, which is something that is, it's not really taught in a kind of a general yoga class, but it's really important still. And Patanjali says in one of the sutras as well, it's kind of, disease is one of the biggest obstacles on that path. But can you talk a little, because I know you've been really into Ayurveda as well those past years. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. It might take a little circuitous route to get back there, but I mentioned a word a minute ago, samadhi, as the state of integration. And the opposite of that is vyadhi. And vyadhi is disintegration or disharmony and ultimately dis-ease. And this arises, the not being fully integrated arises because of the misunderstanding we have about who we are. So when we don't know ourselves as the kind of pure consciousness or pure being underlying all of the sensations, emotions, and thoughts, we identify ourselves with the sensations, emotions, and thoughts. Mm-hmm. So as we grow in life to become Sandra and David, and now I'm David, and I come with all this package of experiences that I've held on to. I'm David, who is this age, this size, this level of experience, whatever it may be, so that, you know, you interact with the world with a slight bias in a way about how you experience things. Because you want it to be everybody wants to be happy all the time. That's the ideal. But we mistake what will make us happy. So we think, I'll be happy if this circumstance is met, or the, you know, classic things. If only she loved me, I'd be happy. If only I could eat that, I'd be happy. If only I had that job, I'd be happy. If only I was 6'2" instead of 5'1", I'd be happy.
Yeah.
All of these things, probably that will never be possible. So we mistake a number of things. First, we're mistaking our emotions and our thoughts and our experiences for who we really are, which is, instead of understanding ourselves at the deepest level as the peaceful being, we're mistaking it for our experiences. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
We're also mistaking the broccoli and the ice cream in terms of their benefit or their detriment. So we mistake things that are pleasurable for things that are good, and things that are less pleasurable for things that are bad. And they're not always the same. Sometimes we don't want to get up in the morning and practice yoga, but ultimately it's going to be better for us than staying in bed and thinking, I'll have that nice extra hour and it'll be great, and that tomorrow I'll get up. We mistake things that are impermanent for lasting. We mistake short-lived pleasure for happiness in the long term. And these mistakes, and ultimately, we mistakenly think that we've got to do everything to survive. And, you know, that sounds like a real silly thing to say, because of course we want to survive, but people get fearful and anxious and ultimately become violent and disturbed in their reaction to the world out of that clinging on to what's mine, my land, my possessions, my this, my that. You're bad, you're different. And so we create conflict. Now, all of this mistaking of ourself for our experiences of things that are good for things that are not necessarily good, etc., create a state of disharmony or vyadi, and that expresses itself as illness eventually. Because when we have this disharmonious kind of jumble of emotions and thoughts and feelings, our systems aren't working optimally, and so we make poorer choices. So we might be there going, you know, I really want to be healthier, and I want to live happier in a happier way, and I want to be the best version of myself I can be. But I just find it really hard to get out of bed. And, you know, Sandra's doing yoga and she looks great and she seems happy. Maybe I should do that, but I just can't get myself going. So the disharmony and the disintegration leads to a kind of inability to get motivated to move. That's the second of 9 obstacles that we're commonly faced with. And we doubt ourselves. We start to go, I'll never manage that. I won't do that.
It won't work anyway.
It won't work for me.
Yeah.
And so we get stuck in a kind of treadmill or a little what do you call that in German? That hamster rad.
Teufelskreis.
Yeah, Teufelskreis. But I love the thing you have in the little mouse cages and the hamsters run around.
Yeah. That's right. The hamster wheel. Yeah.
Anyway, so we get stuck in that chain of I feel a little bit less. I'm not functioning optimally because I'm out of balance. That makes me a bit lethargic. Creates doubt in my mind. Then I do things a bit carelessly or a little bit less well than maybe because I don't understand fully. So I go to the wrong type of yoga, or I do something and I go, oh, that didn't work. And
anyway,
so
if
we're
you
not so
doubt about something, you're going to have an inner resistance to it as well.
And we're a little bit heedless about what we do because we're not so clear. And then the propensity is then to fall back onto the things that give us momentary pleasures. So we get lazy because things don't work and we haven't done enough. And then we get into that Teufelskreis of being stuck, that vicious circle of being stuck. And so we console ourselves with things. So I say, feck it, I'll just have another glass of wine. And for a moment, we feel a bit better. Or the cigarette or the burger or whatever it may be that gives us a little momentary relief from kind of reflecting on what the whole chain of events that we're actually dissatisfied with ultimately. So instead of being able to act to get out of it, we feel numbed and we try and push it away or ignore it in some way by giving ourselves a temporary release. And that brings us to a state of self-delusion almost, where we can say, I tried that and it didn't work, or this works really well, but in fact it's not changing stuff. And very important here that people listening to this, if anybody listens to it, might be saying, hang on a second, that's all very negative about how people live their lives, but it's not really. It's asking us it's asking people to look at ourselves, me included, and you. Everybody needs to look and go, okay, is there some possibility that this is the case for me, that I could change something that would ultimately have a positive effect? It's not a criticism of how we live. It's just the way that we've been trained and taught to live. That's our society. We've been taught, work hard to get enough money to have a comfortable life, to experience as much pleasure as you can and avoid as much pain as you can. A very reasonable and very rational thing to do. It's just that we choose the wrong things. We try to make ourselves happy with things that don't last. So if we want long-term happiness, we have to find something that's reliable and not changeable. And the only thing that's not changeable and is really reliable is that inner conscious, pure aspect of ourselves. And when we connect to that, we realize that irrespective of the external circumstances, I remain and retain an underlying happiness that lifts me through the bad times and allows me to enjoy the good times even more. So there's nothing about austerity or, having to be monk-like or withdrawing from the world. We can live in the world and be yogic, but we start to make better choices. So I can still enjoy the dessert so long as I've had a good, healthy diet and lifestyle for most of the time. If I only do that. So it's about, if we look at Ayurveda and these principles of how we eat and really it's quite kind of simple. We encourage a largely plant-based diet as much as possible, fresh, organic, lots of green leafy veg, lots of beans and pulses and nuts and legumes and healthy stuff, good fats, olive oil, avocados, nuts, seeds, all these. If you do eat meat, then try and find the best sourced protein, high quality, organic grass-fed beef, etc. And so we give our body the best fuel possible, and we leave out the really junky stuff. And then our system starts to work better. So then we automatically find it easier to choose the other practices to be able to get out of bed. We've slept better. We can get up. We can do yoga. All those things start to fall into place simply because, if you drive a car and you put shitty petrol into it all the time,
absolutely,
and don't put in any oil, then it's going to start to not function properly. So if we're clogging up our systems with poor quality nourishment, then it's no wonder that things go pear-shaped. So, if you look at the two big things that really are affecting us today are probably in the West, a huge amount related to diet, and that allied to the massive level of chronic underlying stress that people live in. This is a perfect storm creating inflammation in the body, which goes on to further imbalance the systems, and it ultimately expresses as the chronic diseases that we see, chronic diseases like cancer, cardiovascular disease, autoimmune diseases, neurodegenerative diseases, cognitive impairment, all of the things that are the major killers in Western society, and all of which are ultimately largely preventable if we take the appropriate steps. And the other thing I'd really try to emphasize is it turns out that it's great fun. That when you start to feel better, when you start to do something that's positive for yourself and you start to feel better, it becomes the thing that gives you the pleasure.
That's it.
Or the thing that used to give you.
That's what happens when you start yoga practice, isn't it? That you start a little bit and then you realize, actually, on those days when I did my yoga in the morning, I felt so much better. And then you start also to realize on days, say I had a big dinner of something that didn't make me feel good the day before, the evening before, I will feel it in my yoga practice in the morning. And so I have these little experiences of success, and that will be the motivation for me to do more and to maybe change the diet and, start to get to know myself really, what really feels good for me even, because that's new to a lot of people.
I mean, you're looking at the ultimate reformed rake, because when I started this journey, like 37 years ago, like I smoked, I drank quite a lot. I was an actor and I lived up late at night, drinking beer, smoking cigarettes, eating at midnight, going to bed at 4 a.m. And then I started to do yoga, and I was getting up in the morning, maybe not so early, but doing yoga after a night out till 3 or 4 a.m. and going, this feels bad. This feels really bad. And then realizing the comparison to days when I hadn't had that experience the night before, or when I'd been kind of a bit cleaner living, said, oh, there's a big difference. So little by little, the balance shifted. And it wasn't that I stopped doing anything or I gave up anything. It gradually fell away. So what's important to understand is that you never lose anything that's really of value to you.
Exactly.
But you gain so much that you realize is of immense value. And then it becomes, so then I was able, it took many years in my case, but after a while I was able to still go out with my friends and enjoy the evening, but without a lot of the less healthy aspects to it. So,
that's a good way of putting it. There, you never lose anything that's not of value to you.
Yeah, it's really kind of key to understanding. And nature has this way of, as your system starts to rebalance itself, because it's suddenly got kind of good food that's feeding the microbiome and making your gut healthy and all the rest of the things that inflammation is going down. You have tools that are helping you to de-stress. You're coping better with those problem situations that arise in life inevitably. And you're feeling happier and more contented in yourself. You suddenly realize, wow, this is actually the thing that gives me joy.
Yeah.
And it makes it's like the more you practice, the easier it becomes to practice.
Exactly.
it becomes a self-fueling system.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a little magical kind of thing. The difficulty is that, for people to understand that, it's not like you have to commit hours and hours and hours. I'm really trying to encourage people to understand. Start to do a little bit regularly, a little bit every day, even, 15, 20 minutes. So you start to build that habit of practice, that habit of taking time for you, because really it's self-care. It's about looking after yourself. And if you do that on a regular basis and start to see the effects, suddenly you have the energy to turn that 20 minutes into half an hour. And you do a little bit of movement, you do a little bit of breathing, you do a little bit of sitting quietly, because, this is really the kind of mad thing. Most people don't get any time in their day, or don't take any time in their day where this switches off.
Yeah.
There's a voice in the head that's constantly, from the moment you wake up, it starts talking and it never stops. Somebody described it once as, it said, imagine you had a roommate, and that roommate accompanied you everywhere you went and kept talking in your ear and commenting on everything you said, everything you did, every experience you were making. There was a little internal commentary. There's the Irish expression, it would wreck your head.
Yeah.
And it does wreck your head.
It does, yeah.
So to find time where that actually starts to recede and go quiet. There was
and you said as well, that then we will start to see clearly. We will start to see things as they are, and that's what it feels like as well, isn't it? After some time, then we start to realize, oh, actually, this is what feels good to me. This is who I actually am.
The experience of peacefulness that happens when we actually just stop. And it's not that you do anything. People often think, how do I do that? You don't do anything, because you have all the, we talked about having all these perceptions through the senses, the emotions that arise as a result of our experiences and the thoughts that follow. So the first thing you just do is you go somewhere quiet. You're not eating, you're not drinking. You close your eyes and you sit in a comfortable position. So basically the five senses are turned down. The dial is being turned down as much as possible. It's like kind of going in and switching off 5 lights. Okay, let's turn off smell. Let's turn off taste. Let's turn off sight. Go somewhere quiet, turn off hearing. You'll still feel, but if you become very comfortable, you won't be kind of conscious of the sensations in your body anymore. So the body part has become quiet. And then you breathe very smoothly and easily, just watching your breath go in and out. And that immediately settles the nervous system. The heart rate reduces, heart variability increases. The body starts to go into a rest and digest mode, people call it. So that there's a kind of peacefulness in the emotional state. And then you just watch. Whatever happens, happens. So thoughts will come. You'll be there and you'll be going, oh, this feels funny. I'm thinking, oh, there's another thought. Oh no, I have to stop thinking. You just watch whatever comes. The image that I sometimes use to try to exemplify the kind of idea is, and it comes from an experience I had in Germany when I was very young. I was about 19 or 20, and I was in a place called Schwetzingen near Heidelberg. And there was a swimming pool that we used to go to, an open air swimming pool, Freibad. And my friends used to say, let's go there really early and get good places. And there was a big kind of visa all around the pool, a big green area, and there was diving boards and everything. It was really cool. So we'd go and we'd get our place, and gradually the place would fill up and the pool would be full during the day. And if we stayed long enough, the pool would empty and people would all go home. So I suddenly, later in life, I suddenly kind of made that connection in my mind. The mind is like that. The thoughts and all this activity, the mind is like the swimming pool full of people. And if we stay outside the pool and watch, just watch, and little by little, the thoughts start to drift away. People drift away. Sometimes you get pulled in and you splash around for a bit. You get back out again and you watch again.
Yeah.
Little by little, the swimming pool, if you wait long enough, it'll be empty, no thought, and the water will be still and clear, not disturbed. Mm-hmm. And that's the kind of peacefulness. And you suddenly can sit there and really enjoy just that experience of, this is nice and quiet.
Yeah.
And if we do that for ourselves on a regular basis, it has such a profound impact on our physiology.
Okay.
That de-stressing on a daily basis is going to be more important even than because even a good diet, if you still have a lot of stress, isn't going to have the same effect that it could have. Yeah. Even exercise isn't going to have the same effect that it could have if we're not dealing with the big stressors and allowing the body, the emotional self, and the mind to de-stress. Yeah. So it's a combination of everything. What fuel do I put in? What behaviors do I try to cultivate that make me feel as peaceful as possible? So, we gradually start to realize, actually, in that environment, I don't feel as comfortable or as good. Yeah. So, I go to the yoga class and that feels cool. I go to the big mad city center where there's a lot of kind of frenetic energy and I don't feel as good. So we start to make different choices about what we expose ourselves to, what programs we watch, what news programs, what reading material we use, all this what information we're taking in. Mm-hmm. And then we start to feel a level of greater capacity to discriminate what does me good and what doesn't. Yeah. And then the de-stressing allied to those things, good exercise, good diet, good sleep, everything is interlinked and works together to make us come to that place of the greatest level of integration. And all that disintegration suddenly comes together and we click into a way of, this is a good way to live. Now I'm kind of feeling pretty content all the time. Just as a kind of, I asked my teacher, Sudh here, who was my pranayama teacher, he used to always, whenever we'd come down in the morning when he was staying in the house and he'd meet Sudh here in the morning and he'd say, morning, David, happy? And I said, yeah, pretty happy. And I said, what about you? I bet you're always happy. And he said, one day I asked him that. He said, I'm not always happy, but I'm very rarely sad.
That's great.
That was really nice. It's just because it's not like you're going to live through life without feeling. Yeah. Exactly. And often people are afraid of that life would somehow be really boring. So you're going to have the ups and the downs. You're going to suffer. You're going to experience loss. You're going to experience grief. You're going to experience pain, but you're going to experience more joy on a regular basis. Yeah. And joy in simple things than you would have done otherwise. In the disharmony, there's more dissatisfaction, discomfort, discomfiture, dis-ease, disharmony. And we have that feeling of there's always something missing.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's like me going around looking
the way
for my...
I've gotten to see the Yoga Sutras as like a really ancient, like a manual for psychological health. And maybe trauma therapy, because I think, what maybe at the time, maybe in some Satya Yuga, where people lived with very little trauma and very little, disturbances, from that perspective, looking at us in our society from that perspective, we must be in constant, mental agony and, trauma, and even things, that are described by psychologists today, like, bipolar syndrome and things like that. That's what we suffer with, I think, all the time in a subtle way. And all that, integration of our parts, bringing our parts back together. What even Carl Jung is talking about, individuation, the kind of bringing back of all of our parts into one unity. It's exactly what yoga is, really, what is described in the Yoga Sutras. That's why I find it so fascinating and important as well, to just, to have them there, to not just focus on the asana, and just to have all of that knowledge in the background, and have that our goal in yoga, which is what you do a lot, which is really nice.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly not something that is, I think, immediately accessible if you just pick up the book. Nowadays, nowadays, you see, back in those ancient times, you had to be with a teacher and work with them, and the explanation was given, obviously, as an oral transmission, as they were spoken about.
Yeah,
and the understanding of sutra, or any of these ancient texts, rose out of experience. So if we're not doing the practice and we're only trying to understand it at an intellectual level, we won't get it. Because the Yoga Sutra are trying to encapsulate ideas about a state of or an experience of our true nature, which isn't readily describable in words. So you can have the experience and you go, now I've understood. And if you suddenly if I said that to somebody, now I've understood, and they say, oh, what did you understand? You go, well, it's very hard to describe.
Yeah.
Which often then people think, okay, he's making that up. So it's why it's such a great resource, because it's practical as well. It tells you in effect, these are the experiences that you're likely to be making. These are the things that the issues that arise because of those experiences and the potential problems that they cause. These are practices that you can do to help mitigate those problems and bring you back to a place where you can correct the imbalances that have caused the misunderstandings. And the result is that you live in a much more contented and peaceful way. But it takes a little bit of time to get to grips with that to an extent. But I think that's why we try to unpack the texts in as practical a way as possible. So you don't spend your time going, oh, how am I going to understand what consciousness is? Say, okay, I just have to try and make my body, take away anything in the body that's causing me disturbance, take away emotional agitation, take away mental distress. And sure enough, if you even think about it, those if you've got a pain in your leg that's causing you distress and you get rid of it, you feel better.
Yeah.
If you've got a heartache that's causing you distress and you take it away, you're going to feel better. If you've got a constant mental turmoil going on that's causing you distress and you take it away, you're going to feel better. So working with the body, mind, and intellect in that way through postures, breathing, and meditation, as is the prescription, more or less. And you've got to remember, I guess, that all of this is Patanjali is assuming that you have a good diet and lifestyle. Yeah. That was taken for granted. That was the starting point. So he talks the first two limbs of the 8 limbs, or the 8 branches of yoga, the yama and niyama, that people kind of misunderstand often as some sort of rules of
or something, yeah,
behavior are actually pointing us in the direction of this is what happens when we're out of balance.
Yeah.
And so these are the steps that you take to rebalance. And the other great texts, for instance, the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, which is another really important text, and not as old as the Yoga Sutra, but it starts out, one of its chapters about breathing techniques and what their benefit is. It starts out as just as having established an appropriate diet.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't know what an appropriate diet is, so we have to go back to Ayurveda to find out what's the appropriate things to eat these days, and where can we find the best quality food that hasn't been already processed in some way or tainted in some way, that's been taken away half of its nutritional benefit. So getting those colorful fresh vegetables and all that stuff, it's a bit of effort, you go to supermarkets and it's not so easy to find all this stuff. But if you're lucky enough to be somewhere more rural, then you might have more hope of getting really good out of the earth onto your plate. But a little effort goes an awful long way. And so you suddenly realize, actually, when I maybe pay a little bit more for better quality organic food, I actually feel so much better. I get so much more nutrition from what I eat that I don't eat as much. And I save in the long run because I'm staying well. And there's a whole kind of unseen rebalancing that's taking place when our system starts to regenerate itself through the health benefits of proper diet, proper exercise, getting better sleep, and de-stressing. And they're like the 4 key principles. You need to nourish yourself well, you need to exercise, you need to sleep well, and you need to de-stress. And if we take steps to bring about all those things, and good sleep is actually the product of the other 3 in many ways.
Yeah.
And all of that is in the Yoga Sutra.
Yeah.
So when we hear, as many people are, these days, when you see podcasts or hear podcasts and see videos of people talking about health strategies for today, they're basically always saying those same things.
Yeah.
And it's not that it's just been discovered in the last 30 years.
Yeah.
This has been the knowledge of most of the traditional cultures for thousands and thousands of years.
Mm-hmm.
It was the Chinese had it, the yogis had it, American Indians had it, most of the native. And today there are still people living in a very natural hunter-gatherer type lifestyles who are exceedingly healthy.
Yeah.
And healthy into old age.
Yeah. And, a part of that is probably as well to live according to one's nature, to human nature, and that's living in my own truth. And I think that's what's coming out more and more as well, what you find, or what I come across, maybe it's just me coming across more and more teachings about the importance of being in your integrity and living in your own truth and authenticity, because, that's when we split off. That's when we, when we start not living in our truth, that's when things begin to go to start being imbalanced, and that's when we live not in our truth. We have whatever it is, whatever we are in a job that we don't like, and we keep going there. We live a life that just isn't really according to our true nature. And then after some time, of course, we'll feel, the emotional impact first. We'll feel not happy anymore. We won't laugh as much. We won't, have as much joy. We don't dance anymore. We don't sing anymore. Then soon we can't sleep properly. And then, soon enough we feel the result maybe physically as well. We start having whatever chronic illnesses coming up and so on. And so, but that's exactly the same as what's described in all of those texts. Also the Bhagavad Gita, it's all about authenticity and being, honoring your true self, your true nature.
Absolutely. And the difficulty is that because we've systematized everything, and everything has become kind of, let's find the most efficient, organized way of doing something, except it isn't really. So our education system, from day one, we're kind of programming our children to buy a car that will probably be parked somewhere outside of the house or outside of their job, and they won't use most of the time, to be able to take a week's holiday to try to bring themselves back from the brink of exhaustion. And so kids at 18 are thinking, I've got to know what I'm going to do now. How are they supposed to know? There's no life experience, but they haven't been educated either. So they haven't been exposed to a variety of life to say, what's your interest? What is it that attracts you? What makes your heart sing? What makes you feel, wow, that's what I want? So you say to somebody, who tells you that they're very stressed, do you like what you're doing?
Yeah.
And generally the answer is no.
Exactly.
But I've got 3 kids, and I've got parents that I have to look after. So I feel in a rut that I can't get out of this job because I've got to, make the money to buy the breads, to feed the kids, to put them on the same treadmill, to get them into the university, to get them into the job, and it's a circle. It's it's gone out of control.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yeah.
It's really crazy. And I don't know if you know any of the poems by W.B. Yeats.
Not many, not a little bit, but not.
There's a kind of off the beaten track a little bit, but there's a line in one of his poems where he says, "What need we, being come to sense, but fumble in a greasy till, and add the halfpence to the pence, and prayer to shivering prayer, until we have dried the marrow from the bone." So, you come to sense, you get older, and you just fumble through some job to add the pennies to the halfpennies to the pennies until you've dried the marrow from it's what a terrible image of life. But that's the life that
is the life that is so true. And it's so often that kids start, they start school having a lot of things that they enjoy and they love things, and then they end school not knowing at all what they like and what they want. And actually for me it was interesting as well, because when I was nearly finished with school, we were supposed to write, we were supposed to make up our minds, basically, what do we want to do for the rest of our lives now? And I had no idea. And I really felt like there was nothing for me. I just have no calling. I have no idea. And I did, I went away and I went to Berlin and I did started my, wild time. And but then later, now, just a few years ago, in fact, my dad happened to show me some letters that I wrote to him when I was a teenager from Berlin. And in those letters, I wrote things like, oh, I just finished my yoga and I read this philosophy book. And what do you think about this non-dualist theory? And all of these things, I wrote in those letters that they were the things that I was passionate about. And I was dancing and I was writing stories and that's all the things that I do now. But at the time, I had no idea that was even an option, and that happens to so many of our kids these days that, they have their thing. Everybody has their joyful things that they really, that's their true self. That's the expression of their own true self, but they don't get to express that because it's not in the category of possibilities that I'm given. So,
I mean, I remember in university in Dublin, I studied science because when I was asked in school what I thought about doing after school, and I said acting, they kind of threw their hands up in horror and made the sign of the cross and said, be gone, Satan. And so you did the university thing. You went to university, and I loved science. I was very interested in it, but it wasn't, that intense passion. And I can remember sitting up late into the night with a friend of mine from the class that I was in, and we were discussing, the meaning of life, and he was very religious in his early life, and then he had lost all kind of faith in that traditional religion, and we were discussing what's really at the center of life, what's underneath it all, what's the whole thing about. And I remember reading a book by Richard Bach, Jonathan Livingston Seagull. You probably know.
I remember that book. Yeah.
Jonathan, and another one that he wrote that I can't remember, which was about a contemporary Messiah who arrived flying planes around South American states.
Right.
In any event, there was a concept that he mentioned in one of those books. He called it the other book was called Illusions, and he talked about an infinite radiant is as being the experience that we can have of what our life really is if we let go of being stuck in all of these perceptions, emotions, and thoughts. So I didn't know at the time that I was actually kind of reading a version of yoga.
Yeah.
And then I went into to further degree in science, but at the same time started acting kind of by the by, and started yoga by the by. And gradually I gave up the science and I moved full time into the acting, and the yoga sort of accompanied me a little bit until the yoga started to take over. And it was just funny that when I look back, I can see there were kind of pointers coming in from all sides, but usually we don't hear them. We don't notice them. We don't kind of latch on because we've been trained to be kind of narrow focused. Get to know, and I always thought in science, I was being taught to know more and more about less and less.
Yeah, exactly.
So, you went.
The times we live in as well, like in, when you compare it to the Vedic philosophy in terms of maybe Samkhya, where they talk about, the balance of the dualities and Purusha and Prakriti, but also in the Tantric philosophies, the balance between the masculine and the feminine, and where we, when we see the masculine as the linear and the goal oriented, and the feminine as the kind of cyclical and more, it's the way rather than the felt sense, or, rather than the goal of something. And we need both, obviously, but in our society, we have drifted apart, and, the goal is definitely more honored still than the way to the goal, It's like we want to achieve something. We want to have an outcome of something as quickly as possible, but not really honoring the way to it so much, and enjoying the actual experience of getting somewhere, or just experiencing.
I think that's really true. And I think that, all of those schools of thought of ancient India, whether it's Tantra or Samkhya or Advaita Vedanta or any of the systems of thought, there were different variations of looking at the world and trying to give a clear understanding of the processes that are at work. And so there's no absolutism about them either. So whether you say, no, I'm a non-dualist or a dualist, it doesn't really make any difference.
Exactly.
Ultimately, you have an understanding of what makes for a harmonious and full expression of the qualities of being human. And our society, I think you're right, has very much separated, particularly if you take that sort of polarity of the description of a masculine approach or a feminine approach, or the masculine way or the feminine way. And what the world sorely needs is to bring back that femininity to it, because, God forgive me, but look at the men that are running the fucking world, who are
And they're not,
metabolically
they're
unhealthy.
suffering just as much as the women as well. I mean, it's
Yeah,
not
yeah.
men or women. Yeah.
But also the women have been forced to kind of try to come into that masculine dominated sort of method and to get to try and emulate that and to be better at it than the men instead of being able to be as bring all their femininity to it. So they suffer on a double sort of way because we're hardening everything and making it, one way only. The softness and that capacity to change and to see things in a fluid way is really being lost, I think, a lot. And it's so critical to how we live, not to be that kind of blinkered. We miss out on so much. We don't see the joy in the world because we're not looking really. And because it's been trained out of us, we've been taught not to.
Yeah, joy is to do joyful things or playful things is in our society often just that's what kids do. It's something that kids play and just have fun. But adults, they have to be productive and responsible
until the marrow is dried from the bone.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's it. You really have to, I think, and even we were talking, Paul and I were talking about it, and I've talked about it quite a bit. You do have to make an effort to try to find the things that at my ancient age of 64, I went back to playing cricket a few years ago, and that's just like running around like a bunch of kids. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
And apart from being really good for your physical health, it's just a kind of a simple joy.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
to find those simple joys is and music and dance cultures that are really kind of give expression in their bodies is so fantastic to watch.
Absolutely.
We don't have that so much because we've become a little bit aseptic and sterile in our approach to life, I think.
Yeah, but it has to come back slowly but surely.
Yeah, I think yoga, part of what it does is it awakens that kind of sensibility in us again, and we become a little bit more prone to seek it and to go, hey, wow, yeah, I used to love that. Maybe I'll do that again and see what it feels like, and be a little childlike.
Yeah,
is no harm.
Exactly, and children. I mean, to me personally, I feel children are really great teachers for us because they're the original humans more than anything, that they show us human nature more than anything. So, yeah, I think I actually do the yoga teacher training that I offer is held in a childcare center. There's they have a movement room, a yoga room. It's really nice with a little flower of life on the wall and everything. But the whole place has a really lovely atmosphere of, that playfulness with the children. But I think it's so important to bring us back to that true nature, and that includes the just joy and playfulness.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have said it so often to people over the years because it's been my own experience. When Grace was born and everything that happened after, it's hard to remember life almost before that. But I suddenly had the realization that now there was something that was teaching me about really letting go of putting myself in first position. So I think children, and if we think about why do we have that, why is the whole experience of life there in the first place? It's really to try and lead us back to that understanding of who we really are. And children are fantastic teachers for us because for the first time, we tend to love unconditionally.
Yeah.
And that is what the true nature is. Our true nature is unconditional love.
Yeah.
If we really look into it. And, children really bring that out and help us to see, of course, that we get confused about then how we relate along the way so that we don't become kind of so overprotective or so attached to the child that we add another layer of misunderstanding. So just experiencing that openness and that heart openness is really what it's about. And if we open our hearts, then we really can change the world, because it's always because we close down from an experience or from an acceptance of what is, that we create problems. As soon as we want to try to control, we create problems. But when we open up and just let it unfold, and be with it and try and kind of go with it in that, to use that silly phrase, but go with the flow and enjoy every experience, then it changes.
In a way, that is what samadhi is, really, isn't it? It's a kind of a state of being in a flow state, or in actual harmony with everything, with the energies that are just present at the moment.
Yeah, it's that absolute integration. So everything becomes a seamless whole.
Yeah.
Rather than a fractured picture with lots of different parts, and we want one part to be different to the way it is. We accept all the parts, and so if you think of a jigsaw, and we want this piece to fit in there, but it actually doesn't fit in there. But when we get it all together and the whole piece fits together, then it becomes one picture. It's no longer 1,000 different pieces.
Yeah,
that's for me. That's kind of the feeling of, on a practical level, what samadhi is. It doesn't mean being in a transcendental state for, sitting on a cushion with your beatific look on your face and separate from the world. It's being in the world, being present in the world, being fully integrated in it.
Yeah.
And experiencing it as it is. The Yoga Sutra has that great line in the second book, and it says, that basically it says there's light and there's darkness and there's energy, and that's the nature of the world. And the reason that we're here is to experience it, boga pavargatam drishyam, to experience that and to lead us to the state of free liberation from misunderstanding. That's the key.
Yeah.
That it's not that we have to withdraw from the world; we have to actually be in it.
Yeah.
And be in it fully.
Yeah.
And relish it. I guess.
Beautiful. On that note, we've been talking about way more than an hour.
Oh God, I'm so sorry.
But no, that's beautiful. It's great. I love it. Just before,
but you know that nobody listens to an hour and a half. These days.
I wouldn't be too sure. I don't know. I do. I listen to podcasts a lot, and I love long podcasts. So cool. Hopefully some other people do as well.
Oh yeah, no, well,
yeah.
Hopefully you can make sense of my sometimes rambling thoughts.
Oh, I really like your rambling thoughts. I always did.
Well, thank you so much for asking me and taking the time.
Before we finish, I just want for people to know actually where you are teaching and what you're offering at the moment. Maybe you can just quickly give a little bit of that as well.
Well, I suppose Paul and I run as Ayurveda Living in Dublin. Ayurveda Living is a yoga center and Ayurvedic clinic, and we're teaching there on a regular basis. We also do retreats generally once a year, maybe twice a year, sometimes in Europe. Usually, I teach also in Germany on a fairly regular basis. So I'm in Wolpertshausen near Gießen in November, from the 22nd to the 24th. And yeah, we can be contacted obviously at info@yogavedaliving.com. And we teach courses, we teach regular classes, and we teach courses in Ayurveda and lifestyle, nutrition, science, everything, all brought together, health, well-being, meditation.
Ola obviously is just as fabulous as you are as well. So
even more.
That's great. Well, thank you so much. Maybe we'll do that again.
My pleasure, Sandra.
And yeah, talk to you soon. Thank you.
All righty. Listen, God bless. Take care.
You were listening to a podcast on radical self-love, an Ayurvedic perspective of body and mind by Sandra Hayes and the Little School of Happiness. For more information and offers, go to www.sandrahayes.eu.